earlier this week, you were like, there's no way Jabari's dropping past 2. And I said, the only way is if the Magic were pulling something and Banchero was going 1. My understanding was OKC taking Chet the whole time. That was really tested. And then lo and behold, man, like we're obviously going to start here. I want to spend a number of minutes on not just the top 3, but the top 5. This is riveting and fascinating to me, Parrish. I don't disagree with this. I think I was the only person in the media who had Paolo Banchero as like the number 1 prospect out there. If someone else is out there, you're paid full time to do this, I'd love to have you in my company. So I had it. You did. I had it.
I had it a year ago. I had it a year ago.
No, sir, my friend. No,
I had it a year ago.
No, sir, we're talking right now. So I don't disagree with the decision. Nada's going to come in clutch here on YouTube. If you see some of the graphics, love it. Thanks to our help with our friends who did a wonderful job on the CBS Sports HQ draft show tonight. So I don't disagree with Banchero number 1 in the Magic. This is what I would have done, but I love how this happened, Parrish. We talked about it on the mock. Leading into that morning, there was that absurd betting movement, which wound up being true. I'll just recap this real quick and then GP take it away. That happens. Banchero moves from plus 1,400 to plus 1,000 to plus 175. Insane movement over the weekend, right? And then it shifts back the other way. Jabari gets a little bit more of a comfort zone, somewhere in like the minus 200, minus 300. And then on Thursday, Adrian Wojnarowski tweets in the morning and resets the betting market entirely. Says, listen, all indications are it's going to be Jabari 1, Chet 2, Banchero 3. And that leads to a number of books taking the bets off the board altogether. Man, oh man, did the Magic have the NBA guessing? Completely duped everyone. So if you got in on that Banchero movement, more power to you. They really did keep a tight shot. Banchero, as I understand it, never worked out for Orlando. And where this goes will be fascinating to me, GP. The 2 other big men that got drafted first overall by the Magic, Shaquille O'Neal, Dwight Howard. What do those guys have in common? They're going to the Hall of Fame, and they brought Orlando to the NBA Finals. The closing lines of my column are this. Considering the amount of undeniable talent at the top of this draft, factor in the drama, 11th hour, 59th minute, Orlando doing this, pulling the rug out from everyone. Anything shy of Banchero taking Orlando to the finals is probably going to be seen as a failure. You had Jabari Smith right there. You had Chet Holmgren right there if you wanted to take him. You go with Banchero. I love the move, but considering the franchise, it's all the more compelling. What are your thoughts here as we recap the draft night?
Well, it was a wild day. I'm looking forward to the 30 for 30 on how the top of this draft unfolded, because though I think most of us believe that, well, I'll just speak for myself. I've said consistently for months now that I would take Chet Holmgren number 1, but that I totally understood why somebody else would take Paolo Banchero or Jabari Smith. Like, I don't think any option was idiotic. So this always was sensible to me. And obviously when I woke up on Thursday morning and the betting markets had went wild overnight, it was like, whoa, what is going on? But I'll be honest, once Woj tweeted, listen, the top 3 is firmly in place. And Jabari Smith's going to Orlando, Chet Holmgren's going to Oklahoma City, and Paolo Banchero's going to Houston. I just said, well, that's it. We're done here. And the betting market stabilized. Jabari Smith went back to being the betting market favorite to be the number 1 pick.
Longest favorite.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, when I was asked about it earlier in the day, it was just like, first off, Woj is the best NBA reporter who exists. And he's also, like, I don't think I'm telling secrets here, like he's tight with that front office. And so this isn't the type of thing that, I'll just keep it simple. If he says it's Jabari Smith, I'm going to assume it's Jabari Smith. Just like when he says, when he reports, you know, somebody's signing with this franchise in free agency, I just assume that is right because he's always right. So when he came back just before the start of the draft and, you know, sort of reset everything and said Paolo Banchero is under consideration to be the number 1 pick, I was like, okay, Paolo Banchero is about to be the number 1 pick, because there's no way, and I don't want to speak for Woj, but I don't think he comes back and and re-reports that topic unless he felt like he really had to. And obviously he did, because we now know how it unfolded. So what's fascinating to me is why, because this is not the way these things typically go. I cannot remember another NBA draft where the guy who was projected to go first on the middle of the afternoon on draft day actually went third. Like that is not something that's not normal.
This never happens. You never have a situation where a guy is projected to be first for weeks and weeks and weeks. And okay, maybe there's been a situation, 1 or 2 drafts, Parrish, where that guy goes 2. He never goes 3. This never happens. Totally fascinating.
So, I'm just speculating here, but you start to wonder, okay, why, Orlando could have whoever they wanted. Why, what did they do and why did they do it to convince people that they were taking Jabari Smith? And one logical possibility would be, like, if you thought Oklahoma City really wanted Jabari Smith, like if you believe that's the guy they want and we really want Paolo, so we will put it out there that we're taking Jabari, this is done. And then they'll call us. They got 1 million first-round picks, and they'll give us a future first to move up 1 spot so they can get their guy, because they don't want us to get their guy. And then we'll just move back, get a future first, and we'll get our guy at 2, and our guy's Paolo Banchero. Like, if you really thought that was a possibility, then it makes sense to make them think that you are on Jabari Smith. But the problem with that logic is that most people thought Oklahoma City wanted Chet Holmgren. So if you're trying to execute that type of thing, you probably need to put it out there that you're taking Chet Holmgren, not Jabari Smith. So that's why I say I'm looking forward to the 30 for 30 on this thing, because it's one thing to trick the betting markets and trick the mock drafters, but when you're tricking, and the word tricking it's possibly an incorrect word, but you get the point. When you've got the best NBA reporters in the world, sort of off the path a little bit on this thing, then you have really done some misdirection that I don't think people clearly saw coming until literally minutes before the draft was about to start.
Literally, that was the other context I was going to provide to this. I don't have it down to the minute, but it was within, I was doing the HQ pre-show. It was within 30 minutes that Woj kind of put it out there that it might be in Dow. And, I'm not going to misrepresent myself. I do just happen to have a handful of sources at the NBA level in some front offices with people that I trust, who I lean on for evaluations and intel around the league. And I checked in with 2 of those teams that had lottery picks. And even after Woj said this, both of those people said, I'm still not buying it. This is complete smoke. I'm just telling you, up until the pick, people thought that the Magic were going to take Jabari Smith and this was a smokescreen, and it wasn't. And consider that Banchero's agent is Mike Miller, who obviously you're familiar with. He's familiar with that front office and that franchise, of course. He just got into the agent space. Yes, that Mike Miller. He's Paolo Banchero and Wendell Moore Jr.'s agent.
Paolo Banchero's been living with me in Memphis for the past several weeks. You know that, right?
You should have had this, Parrish. Damn you. Yeah, and the fact that, like, he goes 1, I do love the pick. We'll see if he can be the guy. Magic aren't a franchise that's 7 decades old. They've been around since the late 80s. They haven't had many number 1 picks, but the ones they've had that they've taken that have been this. I guess they had Weber and then they traded away the pick, if I remember correctly. So this is the 4th one. But Shaq and Dwight actually stayed with the team, became Hall of Fame players, brought him to the finals. Banchero, I think, has that capability. I think Banchero has a Hall of Fame ceiling. We'll see if he can do it. But the fact that this happened, and then Oklahoma City sitting there, not expecting, checked in with that consistently in the past 48 hours. Everyone, Oklahoma City, Chet's group, they were expecting that to happen. Chet to OKC. And when suddenly Jabari Smith is on the board there, this is where I would have loved to have had a camera with Sam Presti, just to really see, was it truly Chet the whole time, or was it like, guys, all right, quick powwow, 2 minutes. Are we moving off this? Because you got to decide. And the way that Orlando did this, it had the league fooled. They stick with Chet, and then Houston is sitting there at 3. I was told Houston wasn't taken with Chet at all. So if for whatever reason, I was told that if for whatever unlikely reason it had gone Paolo, Jabari, Houston, maybe they would have taken him because they feel like they had to, but I was actually told that Houston was not in on Chet, period. That's what I was rooting for. I wanted to see Oklahoma City balk, see what Houston did, but Houston gets Jabari Smith at 3. Just the ripple effects of this are completely fascinating. And I'll repeat something that I said on HQ, and I might have said it on the podcast as well. Expand this out even to Keegan at 4 with the Kings, which I did report on HQ before the draft. If you watched the draft show, it was awesome. GP did a wonderful job with Finkelstein, Avery Johnson, Keem Dermish. Poppy did a wonderful job. Kyle Boone, Travis Brandon, the whole crew. It was an awesome experience. But before the draft got going, I was like, listen, I'm giving all indications the Kings are going to take Keegan Murray at 4. It's not Ivy. They're not going to take him. That wound up being the case. So you get to Keegan at 4 and then Ivy to the Pistons at 5. Those will not be the 5 best players in this draft. It never happens that way. Go check any NBA draft in history. There has never been a draft, at least in the modern NBA as we know it, and I think ever, where the first 5 guys taken were the 5 best players. What's going to happen here is at least 1, probably 2, and maybe even as many as 3 teams they're going to want to have missing. Who's going to miss? Is it going to be Orlando and Sacramento? The 2 teams of the 5 that zagged. The 2 teams of the 5 that are the underachieving franchises. Sacramento hasn't been to the playoffs since 2006. I believe that's the longest active drought of any of the big 4 team sports in America. Orlando hasn't been to the playoffs in more than a decade. They both made bold statements, bold moves. You and I both disagree on what Sacramento did. We can get to that in a second. But that's, to me, the biggest takeaway of draft night is the truly unexpected drama and chaos at the top of it that made this, to me, in the moment, feel like one of the more consequential drafts at the top, at least, top 3, top 5 that we've had in the past 10, 15 years.
The 5 guys that everybody thought would come off the board 1 through 5 came off the board 1 through 5. They just went in a different order than basically anybody thought. And so, you make a point about Oklahoma City. Like, did they have to have a quick meeting to figure out what they're going to do? Because they didn't necessarily expect to be picking between Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren. I can't say for sure, but I would assume those are all things you've already actually decided.
Right. But once it's staring you in the face, I just wonder if there's just a quick check of conscience. That's all.
Right. I think you just, like, weeks ago, or well in advance of today, you sit down and you say, all right, if Jabari comes off the board 1, what are we doing? We're taking Chet Holmgren. Okay. What if Chet comes off the board 1? What are we doing? Let's figure it out. Okay. If Paolo comes off the board 1, what are we doing? And then I think you even take it a step further. If Jaden Ivey, for some reason, comes off the board 1, what are we doing? I think those are all things that are basically already determined. But certainly they had to be surprised on some level, if only because the world was surprised on some level. I had somebody ask me tonight, okay, well, why did Orlando switch to Paolo at the last minute? Well, that's almost certainly not what happened.
There's no way they switched. They just
they just because the world didn't know they were on Paolo doesn't mean they haven't been on Paolo for a while. So the idea that, because you see a bunch of wild stuff on social media and it's like, man, the Magic changed their mind. No, the Magic did not change their mind. That would be insanity to change your mind 30 minutes before the draft. We found out what they were going to do 30 minutes before the draft. They didn't change their mind 30 minutes before the draft. And I'll let them explain it. They might just sit there and say, we thought we were getting the best player and prospect from the draft. We don't think he's just the guy who's going to be the most impactful, as a rookie. We think this is the best player, long-term, short-term, the whole deal. We got the best guy. But I wonder if on some level, if you're really, struggling with, do we do Chet Holmgren? Do we do Jabari Smith? Do we do Paolo Banchero? If you're an Orlando franchise that has lived in the lottery, and let's be honest, missed a lot, if you don't just default to, what's the safest option here? Like, Chet might have a higher upside, and maybe Jabari does too. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying there are certainly people who believe that. I wonder if you don't just default to, like, hey, guy, what's wrong with just not messing this up? What's wrong with just getting a guy that we know is going to be a very good NBA player? And we're not having to answer questions about his body or his playmaking. Like, this guy, because I think you and I agree on this. Maybe Chet Holmgren becomes the best player from this draft. That's what I have predicted. or maybe it's Jaden Ivey, or maybe it's Jabari Smith, or maybe it's somebody else. But the safest option among the realistic options at the top, I always thought was Paolo Banchero. And if you're Orlando and you're tired of missing, maybe you just decide we're not missing this time.
Look at you rewriting the narrative.
I'm just trying to now that this is done, let's talk about how it got done. I think that's at the very least,
you're right.
A reasonable explanation.
He's also, and this would not register as like the number 1, 2, or 3 thing, but like he has clear star appeal, and he played at Duke, and he was under the spotlight more than almost any other player in the country last season because of the nature of what happened at Duke with Mike Krzyzewski's final season. Oh, by the way, Krzyzewski's final season, he gets a guy picked number 1 in the draft. Duke actually set a record with 5 players getting picked. The team didn't end its season the way it wanted to, just a little bit short, 2 wins short. But for historical purposes, Duke actually had itself a hell of a night. They never had more than 4 players picked, but had done it 4 times, 86, 99, 17, and 18. They had 4 players picked in each of those drafts. But to get 5 going, and that would be Banchero at 1, Mark Williams at 15, going ahead of AJ Griffin, who had that. Nada, we'll get to you eventually here. We'll give you a minute on that, okay? Because the Charlotte Hornets drafted Mark Williams. Griffin at 16, Wendell Moore Jr. goes to at 26, and then Trevor Keels dropped 42 down to the Knicks. If you would have told me the Knicks have any player that went to Duke, I would have told you it was going to be AJ Griffin. I was wrong on that. But yeah, the Banchero situation, I understand why they went there. Hell, I said he should be the first player off the board. It wound up going that way. Chet at 2, we wait and see with that franchise in general. Is it they are still building. Where are they going to be a year from now? Will this still be the worst team in the league? And will like Victor Wembanyama be the number 1 pick? Like that could be fascinating a year from now. If Oklahoma City happens to be sitting with 1 and Victor's still the projected number 1 pick, something to consider with there. And then I just can't get over the fact that Jabari Smith, of course, he was like looking a little pissed having dropped a 3 because there's no way that he thought that was going to happen. And maybe this is the thing that pivots Houston. Like I said, I wrote in the column, it will not surprise me if Jabari Smith, even though I like Banchero most, I had Smith 2 on my big board. If we look up at the end of Smith's first contract and he is the superstar that we thought he would be, and Houston's like competing to get into the NBA Finals by his 4th season, and we look in Orlando and Oklahoma City are still stuck in the lottery. I don't know. It's there are going to be a couple of teams that spin sideways from this GP, and seeing how that takes shape from here, I can't wait. I'm glad that it didn't go chalk. It makes it more interesting. It allows NBA people and basketball fans to sit here tonight, tomorrow, into Summer League, into next season, and the year after that, and the year after that, to arbitrate this thing, to judge it, to cast doubt and shame on these kinds of decisions. And the draft in many ways offered up what I was looking for, and that was just a little bit of chaos, and we certainly got that in the top 5.
One last thing on the top 3, and then we'll move on. Jabari Smith, when he got picked, the body, and in the minutes leading up to it, the body language was bad. He looked stunned. But you have to understand, like, you would be. He spent the past few weeks and most of today being told you're the number 1 pick, being told by his people, being told by the mock drafts, being told by the best NBA reporters in the world, being told by the betting markets. And that is something people dream about, and with the first pick of every basketball player's done it. And then suddenly, with cameras in your face, you are finding out this is not going the way that I've assumed it was going for a long time. Like, I don't want to overstate it, but like, it's not impossible to believe that he looked at houses or had people looking at houses in Orlando. Like, for weeks, everybody's been saying, you're moving to Orlando. You're going to Orlando. You're going to be the first pick in the draft. And then you're not the first pick in the draft. And then you're not the second pick in the draft. And I think at that point, you're going 3rd. And obviously third is amazing. Like if you'd have told him a year ago, you're going to go third in the draft, he'd been like, oh my God, wow, that's amazing. But once you spend all day in the past few weeks and months being told by everybody who talks about this stuff, you're going to be the number one pick in the draft, your body language would be a little off when you find out that you're not. When you find out that you're not at the same time everybody else is finding out that you're not, and you're on national television because there's cameras pointed at you while you're finding out. Like I felt a little bad for him.